All righty, everyone. Welcome to the Ed Equity VA webinar series. I am your host, Janae Nurse, and I serve as the Equity Coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education. Today, we will have a presentation on post-secondary transition, in which we will share intentional and strategic best practices that allow all students, emphasis on all, to access post-secondary opportunity. So our goal here at the Department of Education is really to maximize the potential of each individual learner. And this means that we must ensure that students have clear paths for life beyond K through 12 schooling. This, of course, includes several options like entering the work field, joining the military, or matriculating to an institute of higher education, such as a 2- or 4-year college. And while many options for next steps exist, data analysis indicate disparities in access and attainment for marginalized student groups. And so our guest today will talk a bit about what the data tells us and some of the barriers to access. They will offer some insight and expertise for ensuring that all students are prepared for the post-secondary transition. And before I go into introducing our lovely guests, I do want to go over a few reminders that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website and YouTube channel for public access. We, of course, have allotted time at the end for questions, but do feel free to pose your questions in the chat as they come to you. I'll be keeping track of them, collecting them for the end. And then I will also be emailing the slides and the recording of this webinar to everybody who registered today. And definitely feel free to share those as you see fit with colleagues or whomever. And so before we actually go into our presenters, I do want to give an opportunity for the director of our office, Ms. Leah Walker, to come on and provide a few remarks at this time. Leah?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very important conversation. When we think about education equity in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we certainly do not limit our conversations, our work, our partnership, and our engagement to just the K-12 space. We constantly are engaging with our college access partners and ensuring that we are doing all we can on the K-12 side to provide a seamless transition for students across the Commonwealth and really to begin addressing both college access inequities as well as the longer range attainment inequities that we see in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You certainly are in for a treat this afternoon. I know almost all of the presenters here and work very closely with them on a regular basis. So without further delay, I will turn it back over to Janae so that she can introduce our speakers for this afternoon. And I look forward to talking with you all once the formal presentation concludes. Thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Thank you so much, Leah. And so we do have a great lineup of presenters today. We are joined by Sarah Bazemore, who is the school I'm excited. The school counseling specialist at the Virginia Department of Education. Erin McGrath, the Assistant Director of College Access and Pre-K through 12 Outreach for the State Council of Higher Education, also known as SHEV. And Ms. Joy Pugh, the Director of the Virginia College Advising Corps, and Alex Johnston, the Assistant Director of the Virginia College Advising Corps, and then Miss Melissa Benavidez, who is the North Central Regional Manager for Gear Up Virginia. We're definitely in for a treat today with this phenomenal lineup, so I'm excited to turn it over to my colleagues at DOE and across agencies who will be sharing with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janae. As she shared, I am Sarah Bazemore. I'm the school counseling specialist and student assistance systems coordinator in the Office of Student Services at the Virginia Department of Education. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I am truly honored to have the gift of your time and attention on a topic that we can all agree is just so vital to the work we do as educators. Regardless of your role in school buildings, school divisions, or school communities, post-secondary transition must be directly related to the work that we all do each and every day. And we need to be intentional about it, hence the title of our presentation. So we are really hopeful that today we're going to help you to bring that intentionality into the work that you're doing, enlighten you with some different resources, and just really talk about directly addressing some of those opportunity gaps that we see surrounding post-secondary success. But before I get too ahead of myself, I want to take a moment to give you a quick overview of our time together today. Our hope is that at the conclusion of our presentation, you will have some answers directly to the questions that you see posed here. Whenever I start working on a presentation, one of the things that I always ask myself is why? And it really helps me to understand the purpose of the conversation and the reasons why it's worth the time, my time, as well as the time of those that are going to be engaging in that conversation along with me. And so I think that's a great place for us to start. So we're going to start with the why around post-secondary transition, and then we're going to head into a self-assessment activity where we're going to ask you to stretch and reflect as we walk together through some really important questions that hopefully will allow you to re-examine some of the traditional post-secondary practices that exist in our schools. And then we're going to wrap it up with a resource library that we think will help you move forward with some targeted action steps as you bring this into the work you do. So, as promised, we're going to jump into that why. And as I shared before, whenever I start any sort of activity or presentation or initiative, I really like to start here. And I think that is really rooted in some of the work that I've read around Simon Sinek and his golden circle model. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it really talks about the purpose of anything is centered in our why, and it brings intentionality to our work. And that golden circle just really reminds me of the importance of communicating the why before we even step foot into the how or the what of any of the work that we do. So because when we take that time to really examine the why behind things, we know that it brings the what into a more intentional and impactful practice. I know that so many of us can get caught up in the work that we forget to really remember why we showed up to begin with. And so your attendance today already shows that you value the need for intentionality in post-secondary transition practices. And many of you probably already have a pretty strong foundational understanding of why this matters for our students. But we really want to push that why a step further and look at the conversation through an equity lens. And so part of our why discussion is also going to be taking a look at some data, doing a deep dive there to identify opportunity gaps that are deserving of our attention and our resources. But before we go too much further, I want to take a second to show a short video. I promise it's short, but I think it's so important because it really speaks to that universal why behind the work of post-secondary support and transition. So this video, you can allow me for just a moment to stop my share and reshare so that I know that it's an optimal viewing for you. But this video comes from the work of Michelle Obama and the organization Better Make Room. This initiative that she has started really aims at uniting and bringing together students in a space where they can connect and create and make a commitment to their futures. And this is one video of many that I think is very motivating and well done. So I hope that you enjoy it as much as we did. All right. I promise I'm going to get it this time. For some reason, it will not let me. Okay.
It's okay.
Now it's working. I got it this time. Third time's the charm.
Okay.
Nope, I didn't. All right. keeps, okay, now it's gonna work. All right. Yes, thank you. All right, here we go. Fourth time's a charm. Here we are.
It's time. What I do now, what I start right here, it has meaning.
And of course,
it has worth.
As we come together to talk about the importance of college counseling.
This isn't for me. This is for them.
This is only the beginning.
This is for those that need a beacon.
A light.
I am a shining light.
Get to college, not just get to college, but through college to graduation. And so I'm here to support you.
This is the beginning of my journey.
This is the beginning of my journey.
This is my promise.
To create a path to something better.
For them.
Today, but the real stars of college signing day are all the hard-working students. That's you guys, all right?
This isn't about the show or being seen.
They better make room for me.
It's about making a difference.
God bless you. Have a good day.
One that matters.
One that lasts.
You have to figure out for yourself who you are now in 2 to 4 years, and then go out in the world and be somebody.
This is for them. For the chance at a better life.
The work that you do is absolutely essential for the future of our kids, the future that we say we want our kids to have.
For all the steps that I've taken to get to this moment.
I know in my heart, this is only the beginning.
We know the good jobs out there are not just for the person with a high school diploma. They have to have some kind of education beyond that.
This is only the beginning.
We've got a lot more stuff to do, and I cannot wait to see all that you are going to achieve in the months and years ahead.
This is only the beginning.
This is only the beginning.
This is just the beginning. What we've started is worth celebrating.
We are family, and we're going to continue to look after each other on becoming as great as we can be.
But the true celebration of this effort will be our continued commitment to helping young people get the higher education they need to achieve their dreams. And this world better make room.
And they better make room.
And they better make room.
And they better make room.
So I absolutely love that video because it truly does speak to, I think, just the work that we do as educators and how we can be so inspiring to students to let them see really the many opportunities and that they truly have a right to pursue whatever passion or whatever dream they might have moving forward. And it's important that we are the ones that communicate that to kids. Because sometimes we might be the only one. So I really like that because I think it speaks not just to students who might watch it, but also to us in our role as really big influencers of students as they move forward. Sorry, it really wants to play again. And so I think what all of us, when we were talking about this presentation and brainstorming some of the messages that we wanted to get across is we really wanted to push this shift in thinking in something that a lot of folks have in K through 12 is we really focus on graduation. And the reality of it is graduation is really not the end. It's really just the beginning of the student's journey. And as we really want to make that difference in our students' lives, we owe it to them to really see past graduation and to help them to prepare and plan beyond that stage, that moment where they walk across the stage and get their diploma. So it's ensuring that warm handoff into whatever their post-secondary path might be. And whatever that path is, that is just so fortunate to have them walk on it, whether it be career, college, military, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that we are part of that journey for our students, because we know that it actually starts in the K through 12 setting. So that means forming a deliberate connection between our students' education and their post-secondary plans. And that makes education more meaningful for our students. And a meaningful education goes beyond the traditional academics. And we owe it to our students to inspire them to dream about their futures and explore all the ways that they can prepare for that future along the way. So that means prioritizing relationships and going beyond the traditional curriculum to include opportunities for students to learn about who they are and imagine their future within the school day. And that makes everything become more engaging, more exciting, and again, more meaningful for our kids. And we know that when education becomes more meaningful for students, that it has a positive impact on student outcomes in those arenas that we are all really invested in, which is behavior, attendance, dropout rates, student achievement, and engagement. We know that when we can make education meaningful by connecting it to their plans and what matters to them, that we're going to see an increase in those numbers or a decrease, depending on which one we're talking about. So whatever it is that we are looking towards when we think about the future for a student, making sure that we're engaging in that conversation and that we're empowering them even before they graduate is just so incredibly vital. And I think that one of my favorite quotes about change and thinking about a shift in the way that we do business is about just thinking about if we always continue to do the same thing and we approach things in the same way, then nothing is really going to change. And so today's presentation is a lot about that, about changing some of the traditional ways that we go about post-secondary in our K through 12 setting. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. And I saw in the chat, Amy, I agree. That video, those words, that music, I had to take a couple deep breaths. It was really, really moving. Before I begin, I just wanted to recognize, again, in the chat, I see so many names of folks I know from school divisions across Virginia who are doing this work already. And I hope that you come away with some new ideas after today's presentation, but also I wanted to just recognize and thank all the participants who have taught me so much about college access and equity over the years of our work with you. But I'm Erin McGrath, Assistant Director of College Access and PK-12 Outreach at the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, or SHEV. SHEV is Virginia's coordinating body for higher education. And insider tip, if you work at SHEV, you can call yourself a Chevy. But Sarah mentioned a change in destination, and SHEV's newly revised Virginia Plan for Higher Education is all about change. The first goal of the plan focuses on removing barriers to post-secondary access and attainment. The vision is for Virginia to be the best state for education by 2030. And our target is for 70% of all Virginians to have a post-secondary credential or degree, as opposed to 54% of all Virginians right now, as you see on the slide, with other subgroups attaining a far lower percentage. We won't get to that 70% goal without removing the barriers that prevent access to post-secondary education for underrepresented populations. Barriers that have been part of the status quo for so long. Sarah, could you advance the slide for me? So speaking of 70%, about 70% of Virginia's students go on to post-secondary education within 16 months of high school graduation. I say about 70% because that number only reflects 2- and 4-year public institutions and 4-year private institutions. We could do a little bit better at capturing a more accurate number, as the 70% doesn't reflect some vocational programs, non-credit programs, and apprenticeship programs. And part of today's presentation will stress the importance of including these kinds of programs in our understanding of what post-secondary education is. When we say post-secondary education, we mean education beyond high school. So if about 70% or so go on to post-secondary education, that means that about 30% do not. And that adds up to around 25,000 students every single year. Sarah, you can advance this slide, please. Okay. You might think that 70% post-secondary enrollment for high school students isn't too bad. But let's break down who that 70% is. You'll see that white students have hovered around the 72% mark, and Asian students have hovered around the 87% mark over the last 5 years where data were available. Other students traditionally underrepresented in higher education, are not enrolling in post-secondary at those same rates. You may have heard this described as the achievement gap in the past, but today we'd like to frame this issue differently as the opportunity gap, which Sarah mentioned. Literature tells us that achievement gaps describe disparities in educational attainment between students, like what you're seeing on the screen now. But opportunity gaps describe inequities and inequalities in the distribution of educational opportunities. Opportunity gaps are the inputs, while achievement gaps are the outputs. Next slide, please. So I'm going to read this quote from a study that was done on college access in Virginia. Historically, college attendance and associated benefits has been least accessible to traditionally underrepresented populations, including persons from low-income families, first-generation students, persons with limited English proficiency, and persons from a variety of racial and ethnic groups. And I would add students with disabilities. Today, we're going to look at post-secondary access and attainment through an equity lens, identifying students who we have not served well and figuring out what we should stop doing and what we should start doing to serve them better. Finding those opportunity gaps. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see one of the many resources you can take away from today's presentation. It's a post-secondary transition resource map that can help you do sort of an equity audit for your own school or division. This map and more resources will be introduced at the end of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Erin. Hey everybody, my name is Joy Pugh. I'm Executive Director of Virginia College Advising Corps. We are a statewide college access program based at the University of Virginia. We're the founding chapter of the National College Advising Corps, if you've ever heard of those folks, and we are an AmeriCorps program. So we just report to a lot of people because it's so fun to do that. Right now, we serve 48 high schools across Virginia, over 10,000 seniors with college access services. Just like Erin said, we use college because that's the simple way to say it. People don't always understand post-secondary or education after high school, but our folks are advising on all post-secondary options, 2-year, 4-year, trade technical certificate programs, and all of that good stuff. Because that job is not busy enough. I also am on the Virginia College Access Network board, and it's a pleasure to currently serve as president. And so not on the slide, don't pay attention to the slide, just listen to me. We are running a statewide FAFSA project. So if you have any class of 2020 or 2021 seniors who need help completing the FAFSA, we can assist with that. I will throw the link in the chat after these slides. So just know that 2020 and 2021 seniors who haven't done their FAFSA, we've got them. We've got 60 college access providers across the state ready to do a one-on-one session with them on the FAFSA. As we know, FAFSA is the biggest hurdle for low-income students in accessing post-secondary education. Okay, back to it. National Student Clearinghouse. I know some of you are probably familiar, and also some of you are like, data, nope, I'm tuning out right now, but just stay with me, 3 quick slides. So National Student Clearinghouse it's a nonprofit. They provide post-secondary enrollment and degree attainment verification information. That's all just to say, you can send the names of people who have graduated from high school, and then those are run through college and university, again, 2-year, 4-year registrar's office, and this spits out reports to you and shows you how many of those students went. So I put the link here on the slide. That's no good. I'm also going to put that in the chat so that you can just click it and see. Sarah, next slide. When you go to this website, which I know you all will be anxious to do, a screen will come up like this. So you just put in the year. They actually just updated to the 2019 reports. This goes back to 2008. So you can look at graduating seniors from your high school, from your school division, from 2008 through 2019, and click that and look at their post-secondary report, which looks like, next slide. Great, this is what it will give you. So I'm gonna try to walk through these columns without the little benefit of the laser pointer that we all know and love from PowerPoint presentations. So on the very left, you have the number of students, but these are broken down, I think, into some useful categories. And I'll also say, this doesn't tell the whole story, right? So race and ethnicity categories can be very different in terms of post-secondary outcomes. So you still need to know your student body a little bit beyond this data, but at least this starts to break it down, right? By gender and race, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, things like that. In the first column, that's just total number of students in the cohort that have earned their high school degree. And then the third column is of those students who enrolled in any institution of higher education within 16 months of earning that diploma. So it gives you a number and a percent. So for instance, at this school, they had 304 seniors, 167 of those went on to post-secondary ed. Those next 3 columns just break down what kind of post-secondary ed. So you have 4-year public, 4-year private, and then 2-year schools. So you can look at the different demographics from your schools and see, okay, where are students going? Are they going to 4-year public, private, and 2-year institutions? This is critically important. As I talk to schools across the Commonwealth, often the data tracking is whatever seniors self-report at the end of the year. Unfortunately, that doesn't, sort of become the realistic number. So in order to see where your school is and where you really want to go, I think it's really important to know where you are. And National Student Clearinghouse data is sort of the only game in town, the best game in town right now for knowing that information. I'll give one quick caveat to that, which is that there are, some discrepancies in this data, right? Because names are sometimes transposed. If there's, things can happen in terms of the Excel sheets, meeting together or whatever goes on in the background. So there have been studies. It's not 100% accurate data, but again, it's the most accurate thing out there and at least gives you a sense. So I encourage all of you to look at your NSC data, see the trend lines over the years, see which way you're headed, and that is a great place to start. I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Alex.
Thanks, Joy. Again, my name is Alex Johnston. I'm an assistant director with the Virginia College Advising Corps and have the privilege of working with Joy each and every day. Thank you for introing our organization to the crew. So now I have the opportunity to begin to pivot us into thinking about where are we now? So as we were thinking about how to continue setting up the structure of this webinar, we wanted to give an opportunity for us to do an interactive element. So we're going to have a self-reflection activity that I'll intro in a little bit, and also provide an opportunity for us to pause, reflect, and in real time, think about where we all are as it's related to some of the strategic and intentional best practices that we'll share today. So the next slide. So as we were drafting up this activity and presentation for you all, and we were thinking about the ways to think about preparing students for post-secondary success within an equity framework and with an equity lens, we realized that 4 themes really stood out. And the 4 themes are here in our best practices library for post-secondary transition. So those 4 themes are student engagement and voice, family and community engagement, being data-driven, and also making sure that students are aware of the variety of post-secondary pathways. So what I'm gonna do is briefly go through what we were thinking as we were kind of theming out these 4 things, especially within the context of equity and thinking about post-secondary transition with that equity lens. So I'll begin with student engagement and voice. I think it's always critical to remember that we center student experience when we're thinking about serving our students. And so that means we're elevating their voice. We're listening to some of the solicited and sometimes unsolicited feedback about their experiences with us, with schools, with their communities, and making sure to incorporate that into the things that we do for them, and allow it to inform the ways that we are approaching work with them. In turn, generally centering those voices, elevating those voices, making sure students feel like they can be really heard. It in turn, oftentimes encourages an increase in student engagement, which is what we all are looking for, not only in the ways or the number of students that engage, but also the ways that they do, hoping for that to be more rich or deeper ways for students to engage with school communities. Our second theme is around family and community engagement. And I think that it is critical, especially within this equity framework, to remember that students, families, and communities are all interlocked. Our students are coming from family networks and community networks that are informing the ways that they behave, the ways that they want to learn, the things that they see themselves doing in the future. So it's critical to engage families and communities. Our families and communities have a wealth of knowledge and experience and expertise that we want to tap into. So that includes not only inviting them in and working as a partner to support students, but also going out into the community and making sure that families and communities are informed of the things that educators are trying to do for students. The third theme is being data-driven, and this is important. Many of us know that it's important for data to drive the programming and the things that we do for students. And as we kind of saw with this presentation so far, data also oftentimes lays the foundation for us to be able to determine what questions to ask, how to ask them, and also to identify those gaps in opportunity and achievement so that we can be able to actually address them. So it's always important to remain data-driven and data-informed. And then the last theme is around making sure that a variety of post-secondary pathways are elevated for students. And this both means making sure that students know all of the post-secondary pathways that are available to them, but also that they feel like they're actually an attainable goal. And that's the equity framework that we want to make sure that students have, that we're not just throwing out there that they can do this or that, but also that they feel like they can actually achieve that goal. So we'll go to the next slide. So that was just a bit of the context related to the self-reflection activity that we have for you today. So what we're going to do is provide 10 different questions that are formatted in this format as you see on the screen. All of the questions that we've developed are related to one or more of the themes that we just talked about. And what we wanted to do was take a moment to, again, reflect and see where we are now. And we thought a good way to do that is by thinking about what have we been doing? Where have we been? And thinking about a lot of the common or standard practices that we've been doing related to increasing a college-going culture or making sure that students understand all of the possibilities that are out there for them. So the activity that we have, again, through those 10 questions, we're going to give you a few opportunities for you to rate yourself on a scale. One side of the scale is going to be that common or standard practice that you've heard about, that maybe you've been doing for a few years for your students. And then the other side of the scale is going to be us trying to push that practice into an equity lens and equity framework. And it's intended to be intentional and strategic way to think about that common or standard practice. So I would love for all of you to pause, take a moment to grab a piece of paper or a pen, open up a notes section in your phone or your computer or laptop, so that you can record all of your answers to the questions that we have. We are also going to administer a poll for each question, just so that you can get a sense and see where all of the participants are coming from and where they're rating themselves right now related to these intentional and strategic practices. The polls last about 60 seconds or so, I believe. So as we're waiting for everyone to complete the poll, as well as writing down all of their answers to keep for themselves, we ask that if you do find yourself rating yourself at a 4, that you drop in the chat what that looks like for you and your students. We'd love to hear tips and tricks and strategies of what it looks like on the ground for some of these intentional and strategic best practices. And as you are dropping things in the chat, I ask that you all read through the chat as it makes sense, so that you can take down some notes. We want this to be a knowledge sharing opportunity as much as it is a self-reflection activity. So with that, we'll start with question 1, and I think I'll turn it back over to Joy.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, I'm nervous. Numbers are involved. The stakes are getting higher. This is exciting. So your first question, and as a reminder, you're just gonna mark to yourself where you think your school is 1 to 4. 1 is that you're currently reviewing college enrollment data, and on up to 4 is that you review college enrollment data specific for subgroups within your school. We didn't include 0, but maybe we should have. I don't know. We'll see. Just cheat and say you're a 1. It's okay. We're not going to know. So again, you can respond to the poll, and that'll give us a sense of where the group is as a whole. And then you're going to write this down for yourself, just keeping track of where your school is currently on this metric.
I see some 4s. So my 4s, please remember what Alex shared. We would love to know what it is that you're doing, what this looks like. Any tips, tricks, resources, ideas, initiatives that you can share. We are certainly appreciative. So thank you in advance.
Great. Okay, here's our poll. Here's where everyone is. So this is fantastic, because now you have the resource with the NSC reports to bump yourself up a few, at least for this one. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Benavidez, and I'm the North Central Regional Manager for the GEAR program. It's a federal college access program run through Chef, so I'm a Chevy, and I get to work with Erin on a daily basis. So I really enjoy that. And we write out, most of our students have just transitioned to their first year of college. So we just finished this room. And my question is, broadly provide resources and opportunities to all students. That's the basics. And then we're moving with an equity lens. We says use equity lens to provide resources and opportunities for students. So this is now, we're using these resources we have to proactively target families and students. Maybe it looks like, guiding those students who don't self-advocate into AP college and making them more college ready, or AP classes, or IB enrollment, dual enrollment. Or it looks like providing resources that are bilingual for family who needs it. So this can be interpreted various ways. One cool thing that I think that Erin already presented was the resource on mapping your resources. That's a really good idea to do. You can kind of see where are the gaps. Do we have things for our bilingual students? We have things, but we don't have anything for our first generation students. Maybe that's something where we could start a mentoring program for them. Really target and see where your gaps are and target those gaps. So Alex. Oh. And I think this is a great place to have lots of unique programs that are unique to your schools that you really are benefiting. I know I have been to some schools where I'm just wowed to see what they're doing. Oh, someone just put provide bilingual resources, fact sheets, interpretation services for events. That's key, making the families really feel welcome. Making use of VJS and connect with DAR reps, partnering with Goodwill and AmeriCorps to provide those. All right. And it looks like everybody scored around the 2, so there's some room for improvement. At the end, we'll have lots of resources, how to target students, how to make your programs a little bit more equitable. And yeah, I'll move it to the next slide.
I don't know if anyone else is feeling like they're watching is it Family Feud versus, and the survey says, I'm watching all the numbers go. It's kind of exciting. So thank you all for participating. It's been neat to see where everyone's falling. So this next question is near and dear to my heart as the school counseling specialist. You know, I know ACPs is something that are often seen as being the responsibility of the school counselor, but truly when an ACP is something that is owned and shared and celebrated by all staff members in the school, it becomes way more meaningful and impactful because it can be reflected in the work that a student is doing throughout their educational career. So I encourage, even though this question directly speaks to school counselors and their role in ACPs, I just wanted to make sure that I pointed out that really ACP should be a shared responsibility, something that is owned by more than just the school counselor, and input from a variety of sources. So that being said, how meaningful is an ACP in your school building? Is it that we're just going through the process, we're checking boxes and we're saying, yes, that's done? Or are school counselors using data that they've collected from students' academic and career portfolios to explore pathways that have meaningful connections to what students have, what their strengths are, what their interests are? Are they having those conversations with other staff members as well as with families and students? We know that it's our responsibility to have these meaningful conversations as school counselors, but are other folks in your school building also having those conversations? And are they encouraged to contribute and to discuss ACPs or academic career plan portfolios with students as well? And then are school counselors looking at students' achievement scores to uncover hidden potential as they are talking about course placement and thinking about different avenues and where students should head with their course selections? We know that what research shows us when it comes to ACPs is that intentionally designing them and structuring courses that are courses of study that align with career pathways are not only going to enable our students to have that to further their education, but also secure a job and seek advancement in employment. So the benefit of this, it's really, really long-term. And we see that when folks are doing this in the K through 12 environment, that the impact of that is really great, and the return on investment is huge. So it's an important piece of this puzzle. So without further ado, I again could continue to ramble on about ACPs. I just find them to be such an honor and a privilege to be a part of, because it's such a great thing to think about and talk about with students. So I get very excited about them. We're going to start our poll, thinking about how meaningful, how engaged are folks in the planning and the development of academic career plans for students. Awesome. Any of our 4s or 3s that want to share any of the ways that they're doing this, please, we encourage you to do so in the chat. Again, a lot of 2s, which shows that there's just room for us to grow and to make those ACPs even more meaningful for our students. So thanks again for participating in that.
Okay, this next one is mine. So on the left, we have the status quo, right? Traditional four-year colleges are advertised in hallways, doors, walls, bulletin boards, websites, etc. You've got, your door decorating contests, and everywhere you look, it's a four-year sort of liberal arts college. Versus sort of the equity-minded approach to the same idea, spotlight and celebrate a variety of post-secondary options. And we've listed out some specifics here, including making sure to spotlight and celebrate HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, American Indian tribally controlled colleges and universities, community colleges, apprenticeships, certificate programs, military, on and on and on, all the different potential post-secondary pathways that our students could pursue. And making these selections, specific to your student population. Make sure that the institutions that you're spotlighting reflect your particular student population. So you can go ahead and give yourself a grade. All right, we got the 2s versus the 3s here. And any 4s, please tell us what you're doing in the chat. Okay, 2s win again. So just a new way to think about how to celebrate all kinds of post-secondary options across your school.
Hello again. So, is this the right one?
I think this one's me, Melissa.
Oh, I skipped you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No worries. I was like, oh, take it away. I think this one really relates nicely to what Erin just spoke about a lot in the previous slide. But it's really talking about more specifically around the stories, right, of folks and how they got to where they are. And before I dive into this part of the conversation, I want to make sure that I say that some of the strategies that we're saying are in that one. It's not necessarily saying that those are bad strategies or that you shouldn't necessarily be doing them. It's more about just looking at advancing them and making sure that we're taking it that next step further. So I know that some of the strategies that Erin and we've all mentioned during this are strategies that I did as a school counselor or as a teacher. And I don't think it's that those are bad. It's just that we need to make sure that we're taking it that extra step and really bringing some of these connections into our conversations around post-secondary. So for this one, on the side where it says 1, we are allowing our school staff to share their college journey. And I know that, again, this is something I did as a school counselor. I had that traditional bulletin board featuring where all of the different teachers in our school went to college, and then they were encouraged to share that out with students during either morning meeting or whatever avenue they wanted to do that. But what happens when that's the only thing that we are doing, and those are the only stories that we're lifting up? We're not really always providing those mirrors for our students or really showing them all of the post-secondary options that are available to them. For example, are we sharing the path of a first-generation student? Are we allowing the stories of marginalized groups the platform that they deserve? Are we bringing in community members in addition to our staff members to share and broaden our students' viewpoints and on all the possibilities that lay before them? When I think about this, I think about those commercials, and I don't know if they still exist. I think it was a real estate firm, and they show this couple walking down the street, and they're just so upset because they're walking into a neighborhood they didn't even know existed. And they're like, I didn't even know those homes were there. And they're so mad that they invested in, this other neighborhood or area, and they didn't even know that there was this other opportunity around the corner. So I often think about that and making sure that we are really presenting our students with all of the options and all of the opportunities and allowing themselves to see that those options are available to them, and making sure that that's part of the conversation. So yes, please start the poll. Does anybody else remember those commercials? Is that just me? Okay. All right, once again, we have a strong representation by our twos, which shows that we're doing a lot of great things, right? But we can take it that extra step and challenge ourselves to look at a way that we can bring in and lift up those other opportunities for students and other stories.
Okay, guys, I'm back, and I was so excited about this that I jumped the gun. So one of the things, and I think a lot of your schools are already doing this, schools clearly communicate academic requirements for colleges. So that's, I mean, like Sarah said, that's what we need. That's needed. But sometimes I think if we can move it forward, schools clearly communicate financial resources of families, including local and national scholarships and federal, state grants, programs, etc. So that really is, while they feel academically prepared, do they feel financially secure to make that decisions? And I really wanted to include the word families, because a lot of times students are not making these decisions alone. You know, it's not that they're just deciding. There are pressures from their families, from work, from other places that they really need to start considering when they're looking at, you know, the ticket prices, when they're looking at all these things. They're really looking, is this the best decision for my family? Is this the best decision for my future? And if we don't make it something possible, even if they have the best grades, they're not going to feel like that's an option for them. And I really think that we can communicate this in different platforms. You know, use Remind, use that Facebook, different languages, as much as we can connect to those families and kind of make it something that's possible. I think that's great. And one thing is, I know there's a lot on your plate. You don't have to know all the national and federal scholarships, but know where to direct those students. Say, hey, I'm going to reach out to the nonprofit Grasp, because I know they have a bilingual financial aid advisors. VCAN has a lot of connections, and they, you know, use that Calendly account for the Virginia Can, the FAFSA that Joey mentioned. They have Spanish financial aid advisors. So that's a resource. When you're like, hey, I don't speak it. I really want to help someone with their FAFSA forms, but I don't speak that language, and that's a complicated form. There are resources out there that you can direct the students to, so they can feel empowered to do this. So yeah, that's grade yourself. I also want to make a plug for Virginia VCAC advisors. I know they do great financial aid nights, so promote those.
And I think, Melissa, as you were speaking about this, it just made me think again about how important it is to resource map and think about and plan ahead of time, and make yourself aware of what resources are available so that you, in those moments, have the tools and the skills to direct folks to what they need.
Is this next one? It's an Erin slide. Okay. Apologies. Okay. Hi, I'm back. So on the left, we have invite parents to meetings at the school. And, you know, typically that's what you see, right?
dear parent or guardian, please come and absorb this information that we're going to give to you. And on the right, we've got a change in language, families, right? Because we know, all kinds of family structure, our students have all kinds of different family structures. So we want to invite families to be informed partners in the process of supporting students through post-secondary planning. Some suggestions, making school meetings more accessible, providing interpreters, and making sure that the interpreters are not the students or the children of the families that are attending. Making sure that childcare is available, venturing out into the community, because perhaps some of the family members of our students aren't comfortable in our buildings. Maybe they didn't have the best experience in our buildings. So that, just wanting to come at this in a more inclusive way, making sure everyone is part of the conversation and feeling welcome and included in the conversation. We can start the poll.
And I think to add on to that, Erin, too, it's making sure that we're advertising it in more than one way. I know that as a working parent, sometimes I miss those emails that come from my school. And if that's the only way that that information is communicated, I might miss it. So more than, making sure that we are sharing that out in multiple avenues so that families have access and have the information so that they can attend.
I totally agree. You got to hit me phone, email, Facebook, all the targets, please.
Yep, newsletter, all of them.
Yep.
Smoke signal, Telegram.
All right, the twos have it again. So, I think that's great. As many of us have said, we're not starting at zero. We're doing some of these things, but there's room for us to do more.
Great. So this one is about student voice. So bringing alumni back, right? Because we all know you can't be it if you can't see it. And I think even more so having someone in your community that is tangible is so important for students. So this is something that VCAC College Advisors do. And I know a lot of other access programs across the state and probably other school counseling departments are doing this. So are you inviting presenters, so alumni of your high school, to speak with current students about post-secondary options? And then up to a 4 with an equity lens would be, are you inviting alumni from diverse backgrounds to speak with current students about their experiences in different post-secondary pathways? So for instance, we had a session in Southside Virginia where the College Advisors got together and invited folks who had gone into the medical field in different pathways. So certificate programs, 2-year programs, and 4-year programs, and had them come say, hey, the medical field is wide open for all these different pathways. You could have a student who went to post-secondary with some form of disability and was able to successfully navigate that college environment by visiting the Student Disability Resource Center, or whatever it's called on that campus, right? So folks who have some unique pieces that would speak to populations in your school, they can come back and talk about how they specifically navigated that. So let's throw up the poll and see where we are in terms of having student voice and potentially alumni come back and talk about their experience from an equity lens. And to play off some points in the chat, I actually think, yes, COVID and the Zoom environment is easier sometimes to pull these things together and get people to speak to students from different places, right, in the state or the nation or the world. Ones, okay. Lots of room for improvement here. That's exciting because this one, again, I think is something that is very, very possible to implement if you stay in touch with folks as they matriculate to any form of post-secondary. So good luck bringing some more diverse voices to these conversations.
All right. Hang on there. We're almost done. Number 9.
Hello, everyone. So this is kind of a complicated question. So on the number one, we have provide information on PSAT, SAT, pre-SAT, ACT prep, and exam days. Now that is all very needed information. I agree. The second part's a little bit complicated. I think we can divide that into two words. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a long one, but I really, when we're thinking about it, is one is having information beyond the PSAT and the ACT. Is providing information that is available and in public spaces, I should say, like, the hall room, the cafeteria room, not just the SAT and ACTs, but also those community college placement exams. And other exam dates are needed for the community, because a lot of times we kind of push those information aside, that we wait for the student to come to us and to provide that information. But that's just as needed, and it should be it's a part of a celebration that we celebrate those decisions, the ASVAB exams, all of those things. So the second part, as you saw in the beginning, it says provide post-secondary process is visible throughout the school. And I've been to some schools where it's right there. As soon as I enter, I'm like, oh, look at this. I know exactly what's happening, when it's happening. They have a board where they share it. Then that's in the lunchroom, cafeteria, or they have a separate office where students know that they can find that information quickly. So I really want you guys to think about two things. Is that information visible everywhere throughout your school, or not everywhere, but somewhere with high traffic? And are you guys providing information beyond the PSAT and the ACTs? I will also add, in the virtual world, is that on your school website? Is that on your is that on your Facebook website? Those things are also high traffic areas where families go into, and it would be nice, it's just somewhere else to think, not just since schools are closed. That's good. I mean, at least, if you're starting off with already having the PSAT and ACT, then there's always room to grow and just think about. So I think it's great.
All right, I think we're on our last slide here for our self-assessment. On the left, we have school staff plans post-secondary activities, right? And it's an adult conceived, planned, led initiative. And on the right, we've got schools include student voices from varying backgrounds, included but not limited to race, gender, religion, disability, and many others in the planning of post-secondary transition activities. So with this one, we've got, not only is there student voice in the planning of these activities, there is an intentionality behind what student voices are contributing, right? Who is at the table when these decisions are being made about what kind of post-secondary activities will be occurring in the school? Not just, I've said it before, not just the usual suspects, not just, the student body president. I wanted to talk about this one because of the 1, 2, 3 Go initiative, where we've got college nights in Virginia, Virginia College Application Week, Super FAFSA Project, Decision Day, VA. These are all activities and initiatives where student voice should be represented, and a variety of student voice. So the poll, please. Okay, we've got some fours. I appreciate the comments in the chat. It looks like the twos have it, I would say, overall in our self-assessment, which means plenty of room to move the needle.
All right, thank you so much for participating in that activity with us. So now we're going to pivot into thinking about, where do we go from here? So the first step, let's tally up your score. If you haven't already, add up all of the scores and answers to each of the questions. And we'll go through a little bit of what that means for you. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so as you're calculating your scores, you might have fallen in between any of these different subsets. If you scored between a 32 and a 40, congratulations, you're a trailblazer. That means you probably could have presented with us. We could have passed the virtual mic over to you to share some of the best practices that you did throw in the chat. So again, thank you for sharing those strategies and the ways that you implement them in your school and for your students. If you score between a 24 and 32, then you're a Pathfinder. You're doing a lot of these things already. You're pushing to get into that equity framework, and we appreciate all of the work that you're doing for students, for them to be able to realize all of their dreams. And then of course, navigator or tour guide, it's just the beginning, right? You're doing the right things. It's just time to begin to shift that framework, shift the ways that you're doing it to, again, ensure that students understand that not only all of these possibilities are out there, but they can start to see themselves within those possibilities.
All right, so we have, we started out by talking about the why. Why is this important? And why why do we need to really pay attention to those opportunity gaps? And how can we move that needle forward? And then we did that self-assessment for you to think about where you are now and what it looks like in your school or your division. And so now let's talk about the what and what are you going to actually do? Well, we are thinking that as you went through and you did your self-ranking, that you might have noticed that there were certain areas or criterias that you scored lower in. So for example, if you saw that you were really low in that data area, and that would be those questions 1 through 3, you might really want to pay attention to the resources that we're going to provide around data. Or perhaps you really want to look at your family and community engagement. Those were questions 6 through 7. That might be the area that you want to focus on. But we have pulled some resources for you and put them into a resource library or a Padlet. For those of you who have heard of that before, I'm going to drop it into the chat so that you can take a look, and I'm going to actually pull it over as well so that you can see. One of the questions that was asked was if you were going to have access to the presentation, and the presentation is posted right here, so that if you want to look back at the questions or share this out with other folks, feel free to do so. But then as you'll see, we've organized all of the resources into the 4 categories that align with that assessment that you went through. So again, student engagement and voice, family and community engagement, data-driven practices. We have that resource mapping tool in there for you, as well as a variety of post-secondary pathways. And then here are some general resources that we think really hit in maybe all 4 categories, and we couldn't find a place to put them that was just that they could live in all 4. So I encourage you to take a look, explore, and think about what you can do that has these are all best practices, but picking something with intentionality that you know is going to meet a need in your school is really important as well. And I wanted to also point out some of the resources that were shared are in here as well. For example, the FAFSA help information is on here, as well as the National Student Clearinghouse database that Joy spoke about, and a lot of other resources. So I encourage you to take a few moments to explore, and hopefully you'll find something that can help you along your way. All right. And so with that, I am going to hand the virtual microphone or floor back over to Janae to allow for some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And to all of you, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And I also want to thank our audience today. I learned so much just from the knowledge and information shared in the chat. So great to see some of the innovative things that you all are doing across the state. And so glad that you were able to share them with colleagues who may be able to benefit from some of those things that you shared. And so I do want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions now. We did receive some through the Q&A feature, and many of those have already been answered. I haven't seen many come through in the chat, so if you do have a question at this time, please feel free to go ahead and add them into the chat at this time. I do have a question about PD points and recertification points and all of that. So I'll just go ahead and address that real quick. We do not provide any type of certification for attending the webinar. However, we do suggest that you share your registration information with your school division representative, and they determine what will count towards those recertification points. So that is our general advice in that regard. I'm not seeing any questions come through. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind just stop sharing your screen just so I can give everybody the contact information for our office in case there is a need to reach out to us for any reason, whether it's for resources, for technical assistance, general questions, we're here to help. So let's see if I can do this right, y'all. Okay. There we go. Am I showing y'all the right screen? Okay, great, thank you. All right, just wanted to make sure you all had the contact information for our office. You can always explore resources on our website. The Virginia is for Learners website. The web address is right here. If there's ever a need to reach out to us, you can contact us at edequityva I always do this wrong, edequityva@doe.virginia.gov. Let's see. I didn't get any questions, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I do want to thank all of our presenters today for sharing such great information with us. Before we wrap up, if there's anything else that you would like to close with, I do want to give you all the opportunity to do that. But this has been a very informative webinar. For those of you that did ask in the chat as well, the slides and the recording of today's webinar will be shared out via email with everybody that has registered, and they will be posted online into the VDOE YouTube channel, probably tomorrow. So with all of that has been said, thank you all so much for joining us for today's Ed Equity VA webinar.